Hi, everybody. Welcome to my first ever free virtual tour. And I am doing this for the first time. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm trying to see how this works. We have a chat feature here, so um, feel free to let me know in the chat if you can see me, if you can hear me well. Um, I am also going to enter the video from my phone just to see, just in case I can or cannot see the chat, just because I'm doing this for the first time live on YouTube. So, yeah, I would love to know if this is working or not. Mm-hmm. All right, please feel free to let me know in the chat. I can see on my phone that this is working. So this is wonderful. I can see a beautiful view of Amsterdam and I can see my face. So that means that everything is working, which is wonderful. The topic of our conversation today is the Dutch miracle, and we're going to be talking about Dutch art of the 17th century without mentioning the very obvious artists who, of course, I have mentioned in my previous art history talks and virtual tours, such as Rembrandt and Vermeer. So we will be talking about those artists maybe at some point in the future. Today, what I'm trying to do is to talk about some of those less famous artists. And actually, today we will be mentioning a lot of names. Some of them hopefully will be new for you, so you will have a chance to learn about a new artist today. And I will show you some of their paintings, but then you will have a chance to really, go off on your own and explore some of the pieces by those artists as well. And we will be also virtually visiting several different museums. Um, all over the world, and I will be showing you some of the most famous works by those artists. Unfortunately, not all of the world's museums have amazing virtual tours available. So I also have a slideshow for you where I will be showing you pictures of some of these paintings because it's not available as a virtual view. And when that happens, I will still mention which museum that would be, in case maybe in the future you're going there, or just for your own information, really. Again, please feel free to let me know in the chat if you can hear me well, if you can see me well, or you can see my screen. As I said, this is the first time for me using this software, and I just want to make sure that we have some good quality connection here and some good quality material. So I hope it all works well. But in case you can see me well and can hear me, but you're not letting me know in the chat, and anyway, because this also will be available as a recording in the future, um, I'm going to start. And on your screens right now, what you see is a beautiful aerial shot of Amsterdam, of course. And with this on the background, we will be talking about this concept of the Dutch miracle. What is it? How did it start? What am I exactly referring to? So, um, Art historians refer to the period of the 17th century in Holland as the Dutch miracle. They also say this is the period of Baroque in Holland. And during this period, hundreds of artists created what is estimated by the majority of art historians over 1 million paintings. So, this was a true outburst of creative genius by local artists. Quite a small country was able to produce that. And because it is so unheard of, it is referred to as the miracle. And what are some of the reasons why this could possibly occur? Well, actually, in the 17th century, Holland was a relatively young country. Uh, they had just separated from the Spanish tyranny as a result of a revolution. And as they became a free country, very quickly they were able to establish trade, and very quickly they became quite a wealthy country. An interesting thing about Holland at that time is that they had a very thriving middle class, and these middle class citizens could afford to build themselves nice houses and furnish them beautifully. And that, of course, means that they would be able to commission art from local artists. So, this is one of the reasons why um, art had such an outburst in Holland at that time. However, it's not just about the quantity of the paintings that we are talking about here, it's also about the quality and a really big change in the kinds of paintings that we're talking about, the kinds of art that we're talking about. And in order to really see that big shift in art that happened in Holland in the 17th century, I want to show you my first slide. And again, please forgive me if there is any delay with this. This is my first time doing this, but I have my presentation and I hope that you can see it. Let me just take a quick second to make sure that it appears on your screens just as it does in mine. While I am waiting for this, I also want to let you know that you can absolutely leave any questions or comments that you have there under the video in the chat. For some of you, it's on the side. Um, I will also gladly answer these questions. So, yes, you can see my screen right now. And what you can see on my screen is not an example of 17th century Dutch art. It's actually the opposite. This is what art used to be like before that. You can see a beautiful fresco by Pietro Perugino, and you can guess that it depicts the Last Supper. And with this fresco, I want to give you an example of how genres worked in Renaissance art. So, in Renaissance art, when artists went ahead and created beautiful frescoes, these frescoes normally featured stories from the Bible, and they incorporated many different genres in them. Of course, the main genre here is the historic genre, right? We see the story of the Last Supper, but the fresco itself incorporates genres in and of itself too. For example, if you look at the back of the fresco, you will see a beautiful landscape. If you look at the table in front of Jesus Christ and the apostles, you will see elements of still life. And there is also a genre that is incorporated in this known as the genre scene. So, a genre scene is basically a scene from everyday life. And if we separate a group of apostles, for example, this group on the right, it will look like these are just three friends having a meal together. basically a genre scene, right? So what happened in Holland in the 17th century is that there appeared a very clear system of genres. And it was not just paintings on historic subjects, it was also things like really separated as genres. What were the reasons for this? How did that happen? Well, let's go back to our beautiful view of Amsterdam to discuss this. Um, but earlier I mentioned that the middle class in Holland was really thriving, right? And as you can imagine, as they were building beautiful houses for themselves, they were still private homes. And not everybody wants to have a giant fresco of the Last Supper in their living room, right? People want something a little bit more suitable for their everyday life. So, for example, a dining room would call for a beautiful still life. A living room maybe would profit from a beautiful landscape or a genre scene, and so on. So their homes were most suitable for these kind of genres, which are referred to by art theorists as small genres. Um, and what ended up happening is because of that, the free market also really thrived in Holland at that time. If you know any episodes from the lives of those classic Renaissance artists, you will know that oftentimes they were employed by the Pope, or maybe they were employed by a very, very wealthy aristocratic family like the Medici that basically just hire them to constantly paint for them. And that was not the case in the 17th century Holland. Artists had to find clients for themselves. They had to make a living. And in order for this to happen, what ended up being a really helpful strategy was to stay true to one genre. For example, you created a successful, very beautiful breakfast still life and somebody bought it from you. And then, by the word of mouth to their friends, as a good breakfast still life painter. And I keep saying breakfast still life and not just still life because within the genre, there was even more separation. So some artists specialized, for example, on breakfast still lifes. Other artists often specialized in the kind of still life that was called vanitas. We will be talking about those today as well. Same happened with landscapes. Some artists specialized in marine landscapes. Some artists specialized in city landscapes or forest landscapes and so on. So the genre system became very well developed. And another factor that really affected that system of genres was the shift in religion as well. Um, Protestantism was developing, and according to their view of the world, churches did not need to be as deliberately decorated as those gorgeous Renaissance churches that we know of. Their interiors became much more modest, and so again, art started going more into people's homes as well. And we will see also how Protestantism affected the art itself and the moral lessons that art taught us. So, what were those genres? Basically, today, during our art history talk, we will be talking about the different genres that were thriving in Holland in the 17th century and some of the most famous artists that worked in those genres. According to the rules of YouTube live stream, I just have an hour to do this, so I certainly don't want to cut it short. And I'm going to tell you what I know and what I prepared about some of the genres. And if it so happens that by the time the hour is over, I didn't cover anything, it means that we will definitely keep it going next month and we will have the Dutch Miracle Part 2 next month. We will see how it goes. It depends also on the questions that you ask, And again, I'm doing this for the first time today, and I don't know exactly how long this will last. So this is new for me as well. So without further ado, let's move on to specific genres. And the first genre that I want to talk to you about is actually not a very obvious one. I didn't name it earlier. This is the animalistic genre because such a thing existed. So let's move back to my presentation. And after we see this gorgeous Renaissance fresco again, please allow me to introduce our first animalist painter. His name was Paulus Potter. You can see just one of the examples of his beautiful animalistic paintings here on your screens. And my plan today is to show you different museums all over the world, but we are going to start with two pieces from the museum that is absolutely dear to my heart. Of course, it's the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. And the views of his paintings at the Hermitage and the virtual view are not as good, so I'm actually going to show you two of some of his most incredible works here on my screen in the slideshow. The first work that Potter is famous for at the Hermitage is called The Farmyard. And from the first glance, when you look at this farmyard, it's just incredible how much is going on here, right? You can see cows, sheep, goat. You can also see people. In fact, of course, kind of the first group of people that catches our eye, the people in the bottom right corner of the painting. There is a kid playing with the animals as well. There are people doing their work. But also, if you look at the background here, under the tree. Over here, you can see a couple taking a leisurely stroll, and there's a theory that maybe that is Potter himself with his fiancée, who he later married. Um, what Potter was famous for is the incredible precision with which he depicted animals. And at the Hermitage, there's this little trick that we would do. We would ask our guests to find a frog here in the painting. And yeah, the frog is there. It's in the grass. But it is incredibly hard to find because it basically blends with the background. One of the points that we try to make by doing that is again show you the realism that Potter has. Another point though is the color palette of the artist, because the range of colors that he uses in this painting is not really wide, right? There are only kind of several shades of color, mostly brown, mostly warm colors, and it's not a very bright painting, but with these warm, earthy tones, Potter is able to create this really cozy feeling in his painting and really makes people appreciate the beauty of everyday life, just a simple farm. But there's so much love that is put in this painting. And that's another thing about Holland at that time. As I mentioned earlier, the revolution had just happened, and this was the land that was really dear to their hearts, that was finally theirs. They were finally independent, and they were expressing their love to their land in this way as well. And another incredible fact about this painting is that it was extremely popular. For example, King Frederick I was the one who actually commissioned it, had it in his collection for a while, but then it ended up in the collection of none other than Josephine, Napoleon's wife. She had it in her collection until the Russian troops took over. As you know, the Napoleon was at war with Russia, and this was the war where Russia won. And Russian troops chased Napoleon troops basically all the way to France, and Alexander the First, Russia Tsar at that time, treated Josephine, Napoleon's wife, with a lot of respect, even though Napoleon was later exiled. Alexander the First made sure that Josephine and her kids, they had a good allowance so she could continue living the way she was. And as a sign of gratitude, she gave him some paintings from her collection. This is how this painting came to the Hermitage Museum. Quite an interesting story. So this is a very peaceful painting, makes us feel really calm, makes us celebrate and contemplate the nature of everyday life. And another painting by Potter that we have at the Hermitage is very, very different. Let's look at it. So this painting, there's a lot going on here. And this painting is called Punishment of a Hunter. And when you hear the name of the painting exactly is taking place, well, the punishment is happening in the middle of the painting. In the two big rectangles in the middle is where you can see kind of like the main punishment going on. So the top rectangle, we can see the animals judging the hunter. On the right hand side, here is the lion. He's the king, and you can see the elephant, who's the judge, and the animals that are holding the hunter, and his dogs that are basically, the aliases here, sorry, allies here, and they are being taken to court together with the hunter. I'm just starting to notice as well that my face is covering a lot of the painting. So I'm going to apologize for a second, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to fix this and see if my face can be moved to a different part of the painting. So I think this should solve the problem. Again, I apologize for these minor technical difficulties. This is my first time doing this, but now it should be all good. And so, as I mentioned, the lion and the elephant are sort of the main judges in the situation, but there are other animals that take part in this court process against the hunter. And then in the bottom rectangle, you can see the execution taking place already. So the hunter, he is burned alive. You can see him on the left hand side, and his dogs are hung from the tree. Quite a grim procedure, isn't it? And you can see the animals sort of dancing around and celebrating that it's happening. Again, quite gloomy, isn't it? But you won't, it's hard to believe, but the message of this painting was actually a really pacifist one. Potter wanted to warn hunters against getting too immersed in the hunt. And actually, if you look around these two main rectangles, right, on the around the perimeter of the painting, you can see the crimes that the hunter is being judged for. So, for example, you can see several hunters on horseback attacking attacking a deer here, right? So this is sort of an unfair struggle, right? Um, that's what the crime is. You can see kind of a similar situation here. The dogs are attacking a wild boar, and many dogs against one animal again is an unfair struggle. Guns are used against a wolf. A very interesting situation here with a cheetah. It's a trap set for a cheetah where they put a mirror in there, and as the animal goes in trying to look at its own reflection, um, gets caught in the trap. So here are just some of the examples of the crimes. Another interesting one is on the left. You can see some monkeys there. And it's also a trap because the hunter puts some glue in the plates and boots, and so the monkeys get stuck. And after that, the hunter can attack. The scenes on top of the painting also needs, I think I need some explanation as well. The top right part illustrates the myth of Actaeon and Diana. He was a hunter and watched her bathe, and as a punishment, he was turned into an animal and was killed by his own dogs. Again, right? Against hunters. It's a pacifist message. Another interesting story is the bottom left corner, illustrating the story of Saint Hubert, who was hunting on Good Friday, which was a sin. And so he had a vision. He saw a deer with a cross in its antlers, right here. And then, of course, he changed his actions. Finally, we are not sure who is the gentleman in the middle top rectangle of the painting. Art historians believe that this is one of the Dutch government officials of the time, who was known for not having a family and spending a lot of his time hunting. So the idea here is to warn people against spending too much time attacking animals, speaking literally, right? Or if we think of it as a metaphor, um, that could be a message against war in general, because again, the Dutch, just like Potter, wanted to enjoy some peaceful time for a bit. So this elaborate piece speaks of just that. So again, animalistic genre is not one of those obvious genres that artists of that time worked in. One genre that we are pretty used to is landscape, of course, and one of the most famous representatives of the landscape genre is Jacob Van Roystel. And we will be moving on to some virtual views because I always want to show you what their works look like in museums. And from my Google slides, we are actually moving on to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Here we are. Before I move on, I want to mention that I'm often asked where I find virtual views for my tours, and I can't recommend Google Arts and Culture enough. This is where I found views of the Rijksmuseum that I'm using today. And so we are now looking at three beautiful pieces by Roysdale. And kind of one of the kinds of landscape that Roysdale is famous for is forest landscapes with really heavy thick trees, and oftentimes there would also be some sort of a creek or a river there. So this is what we can see on our screens right now. You can see this beautiful forest landscape. In the middle of the landscape, you can see a beautiful, vibrant river. And around the river, different kinds of trees. And it's not just trees. Another interesting thing about Dutch art of that time um, is that there was a lot of additional meaning to the paintings, and oftentimes there were hidden metaphors in there. So if you look at the kinds of trees that Roysdael depicts in this piece, you can see that there are different stages of a life of a tree. So These two trees in the very center, for example, are beautiful young trees, full of life. They're still growing. The tree on the right hand side is kind of starting to fall down, starting to die down. And finally, the tree in the river, uh, is not alive anymore at all. It's completely immersed in the water. And we can even say that the trees in the back are sort of the beginning of this life cycle. They are much thinner. Um, and this painting, apart from being a gorgeous landscape, also represents the stages of life and would make a viewer contemplate contemplate their life. And I want to zoom out real quick just to show you the two pieces that are located on the two sides of this landscape, because I want to draw your attention again to the kind of color palette that was really common for the artists of that time. Again, there's not a lot of contrast in this painting. The artist here uses mostly shades of brown, shades of gray, with a little bit of green and blue. And on one hand, again, that may create a little bit of a gloomy picture. There's dirt, right? There's gray skies, like in the landscape on the right, for example. But you can really feel the love of their land in those paintings. It's not really, it's not supposed to make make you feel bored, make you not like this land. It certainly does have the opposite effect. And of course, I want to also give you a quick view of one of his works at the Hermitage Museum, which again here has a very similar effect. Again, you can see a little river in the forest. You again can see trees at different stages of life of a tree. And again, this overall dark mystical tone with not a lot of variation of color, and that illustrates my point that the artists of that time in Holland would really stick to one genre. If they were good at something, they would often stick to it because that's what the customer wanted, liked, and was comfortable with. So this again is Jacob van Roystel, a wonderful example of the landscape genre. And I see a couple comments in the chat. Evelyn, I appreciate your comments, and I'm glad that the issue with my video here was fixed. Thank you so much for being here and watching this. I really appreciate it. So moving on to the next genre, it is of course still life, and one of the most famous artists who worked in the still life genre was Willem Claes Heda. Um, you can see one of his gorgeous still lifes on your screen, but I will show you the way it looks at the at Rijksmuseum. Here we are, standing right in front of it at Rijksmuseum, and you can see the whole painting in front of you. And what I'm going to do first, I'm going to zoom in just to help you appreciate the beauty of this painting. I want to mention though, if you are interested in this work, some other works by Heda, Google Arts and Culture also has some of these paintings in incredible definition, and you can really zoom in and look at everything in great detail just to appreciate his craftsmanship. But here I am zooming in just to show you this incredible breakfast still life. That's one of the things I mentioned in the beginning of our talk. Breakfast still lifes were almost like a separate genre, and they didn't always necessarily depict breakfast food. A breakfast still life often meant a light meal, that really showcases all the pleasures that there are to have from a meal. Uh, and I mean, isn't this incredibly pleasant when you look at this piece? What can we see here? First, let's talk about the food and drink. Um, First of all, on a gorgeous silver plate in the center here, you can see oysters. What a lovely thing to have for breakfast, isn't it? Or just for any light meal. You can also see wine in a glass, and this is probably wine as well. You can see in this beautiful silver holder next to the wine glass. This is a salt. Salt was expensive at that time. You can see on the little plate in the front, kind of in a little folded piece of paper, these are other spices. Then there's this beautiful fresh bun, also at the very front, with a piece broken off, just so that we can see how delicious it probably is. So these are kind of like the tastes that are present in this painting. And then it's not, oh, and of course the lemon too on the right. How could I forget to talk about the lemon, the gorgeous lemon? But then it's not just the food and drink, it's also the other gorgeous objects that are present in the painting, right? It's silver, it's glass, it's fabric, and then it's even this little knife in the front that sort of sticks out of the painting. It looks like it's decorated with some sort of maybe semi-precious stones. And anyway, it's not just the materials that these things are made of, it's also the incredible craftsmanship, again, that is involved in creating these pieces. For example, this silver goblet, you can see there's a lot of engraving in there. The glass too is very beautiful, of different shapes, different little forms that decorate it. There's more glass on the right. So there are many, many levels on which you can enjoy not just this particular still life by Haida, but in general, good Dutch still life of that time, right? So first of all, it's that, you know, um, hedonism from the materials and the foods in the painting. Then the next level of enjoyment that you can have looking at this piece is also the craftsmanship of the artist himself. Um, that's when I'm going to zoom in a little bit more to show you what a great artist Haida was. If you look at the silver picture on the right, you can see the different kinds of reflections that are on its surface. For example, the golden goblet on the right, you can see this reflection in the silver goblet. The white fabric and the lemon in the front, you can also see that reflecting in the goblet. Finally, if you look at the goblet and the glass of wine on the left, you can even see the reflections of the room itself in them. So it becomes pretty clear to us that there's a window on the other side of us, right? And I mean, how incredible, right? We can see even a little bit more of the room. Uh, so that's one way, again, to enjoy Haida's craftsmanship. And then it's just how he depicts different material. I want to specifically draw your attention to this little glass picture on the left and a wine glass on the right, um, to see just how skilled he is at depicting glass as well. And then of course food, right? It's so incredibly appetizing to see these oysters and this bread and so on. I also want to add that, again, this was by no means a typical breakfast of a Dutch middle class citizen of that time. uh, Almost everything that is depicted in this painting is incredibly expensive. For example, spices would be delivered, to Holland from across the world. Not every middle class Dutch citizen would be able to afford things made of glass or silver. Um, so there is even that kind of enjoyment to be had. Finally, it's the composition of the painting too. As I zoom out, you can also notice the diagonal line that goes from the top right corner of the painting to the bottom left, sort of kind of moving our attention from the goblets and the pitchers on the right to the oysters and the spices on the left. Now, I mentioned in the beginning of my talk that Dutch art of the time is also a lot about um, the Protestant religion. And one of the effects that the Protestant religion had on Dutch art of the time is that um, most good works of art also had kind of a moral aspect to them. Uh, you can of course just enjoy the beautiful look of it, but if need be, there is often through metaphors a moral message to be found. And you can find that moral message through symbols. And again, Dutch citizens of the time knew a lot of these symbols. The educated people of the time, they knew it. There were even special books, reference guides for symbols like that, that people would use to learn. And of course, there are symbols of Christianity that you can see here. Um, it's not an incident, it's not a coincidence that we can see bread and wine here, of course. These are symbols of Jesus Christ, but also oysters can be translated as the symbol of Virgin Mary. Shellfish in general sometimes was viewed as a symbol of Virgin Mary because in shellfish, pearls are often to be found, and Virgin Mary is sort of this pure pearl that was found in the midst of mere mortals. At the same time, oysters were could be read as a different kind of symbol, a symbol of womanhood, and there is a symbol of manhood here as well, which is a knife here. So there's also something to say about those sensual pleasures in here. So, and as the artist moves our eye sort of from top to bottom, from these symbols of earthly pleasures to symbols of Jesus Christ and Virgin Mary, possibly the message that we could find in this painting is that we should kind of leave behind the everyday earthly pleasures and strive towards something more spiritual, such as following Christianity and Protestantism. But again, you can choose how you want to view these paintings and what kind of level of meaning you choose to enjoy from it. Anyway, um, this love of meaning in still lives also created a separate um, subgenre of still life, which was called vanitas. And a vanitas still life often involved a depiction of a skull. That's kind of how you can tell that this is a vanitas still life. And this wonderful work by Jan Davids de Hem is a great example of a vanitas still life. So of course, at the center of the painting here, we can see a human skull, which really reminds us of this finite nature of life. And this particular skull also has this sort of twine around it, which is supposed to remind us of the crown of thorns. So it has that extra meaning. And then the things that the skull is surrounded with they also remind us of this sort of similar thing, the finite nature of life. First of all, the book on the left, uh, just incredibly well painted. This book is read only to the middle. The reader only read it to the middle, and that symbolizes that the book of life also has been only read to the middle. The glass of wine on the right has also been drunk only to the middle, the same kind of metaphor. And then the two beautiful roses in the bottom right symbolize here, something in between. There is the rose that has not yet fully bloomed. It's just about to open up. And on the other hand, the other rose, is in full bloom, also symbolizing different stages of life. Again, these types of still life, we could enjoy the beauty of the materials and the artist's skill. Again, we can see gorgeous reflections in here and so on. Also, we can have a moral message to it. So vanitas and breakfast still lives were probably some of the most common types of still life in Holland at that time. But I want to show you another example of an artist who worked in the still life genre, but sort of moved on from uh, these two subgenres and created something that had a little bit from both. And this artist, his name you can see in the bottom here, Peter Class created this wonderful still life with clay pipes. Um, so this is not exactly a breakfast still life, right? Because there is no food here. You can just see a glass of beer in the back. At the same time, it's not a vanitas still life because you can't see a skull in here. So this is a depiction again that we can enjoy. The artist skillfully depicts different materials such as beer, even with a little bit of foam on the top, clay pipes and tobacco, burning coals in a little bowl or a heater, and this beautiful clay pitcher as well. He masterfully depicts all these different materials. At the same time, if we wanted to find a deep meaning in this painting, we also could. Some art critics believe that the artist depicted different elements in here. So we can see the beer in a glass symbolizes water, the burning coals symbolize fire, a clay pitcher symbolizes earth, and pipes and smoking symbolizes air. So it could be the depiction of these four elements. On the other hand, this also could be a depiction of this either the finite nature of life or the desire to stop the moment, because the foam on top of the beer glass is something that is, only there for a little bit and is about to go away. Again, this work is at the Hermitage, and I just want to take a moment to appreciate this gorgeous hall. If you have been to my Hermitage tours before, you probably heard me talking about this third building of the Hermitage, where it was designed especially to match the pieces that were exhibited in the rooms. And so this room was designed specially for these 17th century Dutch artworks. And we also call it the tent roofed hall because of the roof. It looks like a beautiful tent, and it's just incredibly beautifully decorated, as you can see. Anyway, we are going to move on to another genre that was popular in Holland at that time. I'm probably going to start talking about my next artist today, but I will finish talking about him next month because he had quite an incredible life. There's a lot to talk about. We will see. We shall see. The next artist is often compared by art critics to Rembrandt himself because of the tremendous skill that he had and the depth that he had in his paintings. So his name was Franz Hals, and Franz Hals was a true expert in portraits. Again, as you know, um, art of that time, the way that art developed was largely affected by representatives of this growing middle class. And so Franz Hals, he created portraits of middle class citizens, people who were enjoying their newfound success. And one of my most favorite examples is this portrait from the Met. You can see the Met, sorry. You can see the name of this gentleman here on the right. Since I don't speak Dutch, I'm not even going to attempt to say it. But one thing we know about this gentleman is that he was the owner of a brewery. And I think that when we look at just his face and his figure, I love how Halls found just a perfect way to depict this man, the owner of the brewery. On one hand, you see this joy in his face. He has these rosy cheeks, a little bit of a smile, like a little sparkle in his eyes. He knows, he knows the pleasure of life. On the other hand, this is a successful man. He is proud of himself, and that's why he is standing the way he is. He is looking at us the way he is, and he is dressed the way he is. And Haas is not afraid to show us again the beauty, not just of this man and his success, but also the way he's dressed. Look at his gorgeous silk jacket, right? And the lace of his collar. Um, he definitely is a master of depicting different textures, and then his beautiful hair as well. It is wonderful. I must say that Franz Hals, in a lot of ways, was ahead of his time in terms of technique. He had a tremendous career and a lot of success in the beginning. Unfortunately, later, um, his career died down and he died in poverty. We will be talking a little bit more about that. So he was a little bit ahead of his time. And to really illustrate this point, I want to show you the sleeve of this gentleman's shirt. And you can see that the sleeve is painted in a rather impressionistic manner. These are very brave brush strokes that, in a way, could maybe remind you of some of Cézanne's brush strokes as well. And we know for sure, just jumping ahead a little bit, the works of Franz Hals were forgotten for over a century. Nobody remembered about him. But then in the 19th century, the art he was rediscovered as an artist and greatly appreciated, especially by impressionists and post-impressionists. And later, Vincent van Gogh, one of my most favorite artists, set on a mission to count the shades of black in paintings by Hall, and counted over 30 different shades of black. So he was a true master of his kind. So this again, the Met, unfortunately, I was not able to find good virtual views of this museum. But if you do want a quick virtual tour of the Met, they do have some wonderful videos on their website. They call it the Met 360. So if you go on their website, you can see it. It just would be hard to focus on particular paintings in that format. So Halls made a really big chunk of his fortune um, by creating portraits of wealthy middle class citizens, but he also went on to create different kinds of paintings of people who did not commission them. He would go into taverns or out in the street and create depictions of people that he would see around him. And this is a wonderful example from the Louvre called the Gypsy Girl. And there is it's a wonderful celebration of life. Look at her facial expression. She looks happy, but at the same time a little bit flirtatious. She is looking to the side. We can kind of try to guess what she's thinking of. At the same time, it's not just her facial expression, it's her body too. And Haas likes it and celebrates it. He does emphasize her breasts here a little bit, and her clothes too. Again, I want to draw your attention to this impressionistic manner in which he depicts her dress here, which is wonderful. Um, there are some works by Franz Hals at the Rijksmuseum, but this already will be the topic of our next discussion next month. So next month we will keep talking about 17th century Dutch artists. We will talk about a little bit more about Franz Hals, and we will talk about a whole other genre that I wasn't able to mention today. So we will do that at the end of August. So please stay tuned. Um, there will definitely be an announcement of that in my newsletter. Meanwhile, please feel free to share in the chat if you have any questions. And I would love to answer them. I want to give you a couple minutes to just ask me questions. I hope I don't get cut off by YouTube again. This is my first time. And if you have any questions while you are typing them, I also want to mention the store is free. However, if you want to leave a donation for the development of art history with Olga Cardamon, in the top comment to this video, there's a little link to the website that I will be using for donations from now on. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. So if you want to go on it and buy me a coffee, you are welcome to do that. Again, this is absolutely voluntary. You don't have to do that. However, if you watch a recording, you can also do that as well. The link will stay there in the top comment. I will just wait a couple of minutes to see if there are any more questions and comments. And while I'm waiting, I also want to mention that if you watch the recording of this video and you have any questions about the artists that we covered today or any of the pieces that we covered, something we didn't cover but you still want to ask me about, if you want to suggest a topic for a future art talk, please feel free to do that. So this today was my first free virtual YouTube stream on art history, but I will be doing them every month. They will be free and they will be a YouTube stream like this. Now I know that I can move my face to the side, not to cover the paintings. I know that the software works, so it gives me confidence to keep doing that. I enjoy doing that. You let me know in response to my newsletter that you enjoy hearing about his art history. So this definitely will be happening. And I see your feedback. You liked it. So stay tuned in the newsletter. Um, I will be announcing the next art history talk, which will be the last Friday of every month. So if you want to set in your calendar, last Friday in August will be part 2 of 17th century Dutch art. Thank you very much again for watching me today. And again, I will be looking forward to seeing your comments, questions um, below. And with that, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for watching.